Light flickered above Unit 3A, buzzing faintly like a dying fly. Lauren Miles tightened her grip on the stack of junk mail in her arms and tried not to gag as she reached her door. Same hallway, same carpet stain, same silence. She lived on the third floor for almost 7 years, and nothing ever changed, which was both a comfort and a curse. She stopped at her mailbox, third from the left. Tiny brass numbers, 3B. Lauren shoved the key in, turned, and pulled out a handful of envelopes, mostly coupons and a utilities bill she didn't want to open. But something slipped from the pile, something thinner. Handwritten, no stamp. She bent down, picked it up, and froze. Just a plain envelope. No address, no name. Only 5 words, written in shaky blue ink. I can't do this anymore. She stood there a moment too long. The hallway seemed to grow quieter. The light above 3A buzzed louder. The envelope trembled in her hands. Someone had dropped this. Accidentally? Deliberately? Her first instinct was to slip it back. Wrong box, not her business. She almost did. But then she imagined the person who wrote it, sitting somewhere behind one of these doors, alone. Maybe crying, maybe worse. Lauren looked around. No one. The hallway was still. She tucked the envelope into her coat pocket. That night, Lauren lay in bed, staring at the water stain on the ceiling that looked like Texas. She couldn't sleep, not because of caffeine or noise, but because of the envelope. It sat on her nightstand now, unopened. She hadn't dared look inside. It felt wrong, like trespassing into a moment never meant for her. But still, it was there, heavy with silence. She closed her eyes. Maybe tomorrow she'd forget. Maybe it was just a mistake. Maybe someone venting on paper, then chickening out. But what if it wasn't? Lauren sat up, kicked off the blanket, and padded barefoot to the living room. She pulled her robe tighter. From her window, she could see the other side of the hallway, including the door to apartment 3A. The apartment across from hers. That door hadn't opened in weeks. She tried to remember the last time she'd seen the woman who lived there. Slim? Mid-30s maybe. Always in headphones. Grocery bags clutched close like shields. They had never really spoken. Lauren's fingers gripped the curtain. 3A. She hadn't heard music lately. No footsteps. No sound of life at all. She told herself it meant nothing. People get quiet. People go out of town. People isolate. But the words from the envelope burned like acid. I can't do this anymore. She looked at the envelope again, then at the door across the hall, and just stood there, listening to a silence that felt suddenly dangerous. By morning, Lauren convinced herself she'd overreacted. People write things, dramatic things. She used to keep journals full of poems so dark they'd scare her now. And still, she hadn't meant most of them. It was just a way to bleed the feeling out onto paper and move on. Maybe this was the same. She poured coffee, burned the toast, fed the neighbor's cat, who had somehow adopted her months ago. She made herself a list. Return library books. Buy more cereal. Ignore mysterious envelope. She lasted until 10:12 a.m. Then, barefoot and still in her robe, she stepped into the hallway with the envelope in her hand. The door to 3A stared back at her like a blank page. Lauren stood there, heart thudding like a faulty dryer. She didn't want to be dramatic, didn't want to be the nosy neighbor, but she couldn't ignore the weight in her chest. the tightness that had followed her from her dreams. She raised her hand and knocked once. A soft, almost apologetic sound. Nothing. She knocked again. Louder. Still nothing. She pressed her ear to the door. Nothing. No hum of a fridge. No footsteps. No shuffle of life. She straightened. Knocked a third time. Longer pause. Silence. Lauren whispered to herself, "Just leave it. Maybe it's nothing." She turned to go, then froze. From the base of the door, something slid out. Something small. A photograph. She knelt and picked it up. It was an old picture. Polaroid. Faded edges. A girl, maybe 5 or 6, standing in a backyard. Plastic slide behind her. A woman crouched next to her, smiling wide. The girl was holding a toy dinosaur. Lauren turned it over. A date in the corner. July 14th, 1996. No note, no explanation. Just the photo. Lauren stood there, frozen, heart loud in her ears. Behind the door, silence. In her hands, a message. And now she couldn't walk away. By noon, Lauren was pacing. The photograph still sat on her coffee table, next to her half-drunk tea. She'd tried distracting herself. Laundry, dishes, scrolling through the library's online catalog. But nothing worked. Her thoughts kept circling the same drain. What if it's a cry for help? What if it's a test? What if it's already too late? She picked up the photo again, studying it closely. The backyard looked familiar. Not the place exactly, but the feeling. A cheap plastic slide, patched grass, the kind of garden people stopped tending when life got heavy. And the toy dinosaur. Something about that made her stomach twist. It looked like the exact one her brother used to carry around. Same scuffed tail. Same missing eye. Lauren swallowed. She needed to talk to someone. And in this building, that meant one person. Mrs. Green. She lived in 3C. Retired teacher. Kept her door open most afternoons and always smelled faintly of cinnamon and furniture polish. She was 90% gossip, 10% prophecy, and always somehow listening. Lauren grabbed the photo and headed down the hall. Mrs. Green was sitting in her recliner by the window reading the obituaries. And, well, if it isn't the ghost of curiosity, she said without looking up. Lauren offered a tight smile. Can I ask you something? Depends. Is it about the dead, the living, or the ones in between? Lauren held out the photo. Mrs. Green took it with her thin fingers, squinted, then leaned closer to the light. This is from a long time ago, she said. Polaroid stock like this? Early 90s, maybe mid. You recognize them? Lauren asked. Mrs. Green frowned. Not the girl, but that woman. Her face has a sadness in it, like she knew how things would turn out. She tapped the photo. And that's a funny thing to say about a picture, isn't it? Lauren nodded. Do you know who lives in 3A? Mrs. Green raised an eyebrow. You mean the quiet one with the headphones? Yes. Have you seen her recently? Not in weeks. Lauren hesitated. What if she's in trouble? Mrs. Green gave her a long, patient look. Child, this building holds more secrets than mailboxes, but trouble? Trouble makes noise. If it's been this quiet, maybe what you heard was the end of the storm, not the start. Lauren didn't know what that meant, but the way she said it made her skin prickle. She took the photo back, thanked her, and walked home in silence. Lauren hadn't planned to do it. Not really. She told herself she was just taking out the trash. But the photo in her pocket was only coincidence. That she wasn't still thinking about 3A. That she wasn't. But her feet stopped right in front of the door. She stared at it, heart thudding with that same quiet warning. The hallway light above flickered like a breath that couldn't settle. There it was again. The weight, the stillness. Her eyes drifted lower. To the crack between the door and the frame. There was tape. Thin, clear packing tape, stretched across the seam. Barely visible. One side of it was peeling, like someone had stuck it there in a hurry. Not a lock, not security. A seal. Lauren stepped closer, narrowed her eyes. The tape was dusty, faintly wrinkled, like it had been there for a while. She reached out, touched it. Her finger came back gray. Someone had sealed the door shut. She stepped back, spine prickling. A neighbor passed behind her, carrying a bag of groceries. He didn't even look, just walked by like nothing about that door was strange. Lauren wanted to ask him, "Did you notice this? Do you know who lives here?" But her throat stayed dry. Instead, she turned and went back to her apartment, closing the door with care, as if afraid even the click of the lock might echo too loud. She sat down, heart rattling in her chest. Sealed door. Silence. An old photograph. And 5 words still burning in her pocket. I can't do this anymore. Lauren waited until Monday. She told herself it was because offices didn't open on weekends. That it was better to talk in person than leave a message. That someone would understand. By noon, she was in the leasing office, standing under 2 bright lights and a dusty fake fern. The manager, Dennis, mid-40s, gelled hair, permanent Bluetooth in his ear, barely looked up from his screen. She cleared her throat. "Hi, I live in 3B. He glanced over. "Maintenance? Rent?" "No, it's about 3A. He stopped typing. Slowly. "Oh?" Lauren nodded. "I think something might be wrong." Dennis leaned back, clearly annoyed that his day had just gotten more complicated. "Did you see anything?" "No, not exactly. But the door's sealed, like taped, and I haven't seen or heard the tenant in weeks." Dennis sighed. "Yeah, we're aware. Tenants paid through the year, keeps to herself." Lauren hesitated. "So you've checked on her?" Dennis gave a tight smile. "Ma'am, we don't break into people's units unless there's a smell, or blood. You get what I'm saying?" Lauren blinked. "That's the bar?" He shrugged. "People want privacy. If she wants to vanish, that's her right. This isn't a halfway house." She stood there, stunned. "What about wellness checks?" "That's for police. And unless they get a request from family, or we see evidence of something, well, like I said, and not our business." Lauren opened her mouth, then closed it. Dennis had already gone back to typing. She walked out of the office into the sunlight, feeling like she'd stepped off a cliff. Lauren didn't sleep that night. She tried. Really. Tea, stretching, the weighted blanket that usually worked. Nothing helped. Every creak in the hallway made her sit up. Every shadow stretched too long. At 3:19 a.m., she gave up and went to the kitchen. She didn't turn on the light, just stood at the sink in the dark, drinking water slowly, trying to quiet the storm in her chest. She should have felt silly, but instead she felt watched. Not from the window, not from outside, from across the hall. The thought clung to her skin like cold fog. She turned and looked at her own door. It was shut, locked, but something was tucked under it. She stared for a second, heart leaping, then crossed the room and knelt. A folded piece of notebook paper. No envelope, no name. She opened it slowly, hands trembling. You need to stop. Leave it alone. You don't know what you're doing. That was all. Lauren stood frozen. Her breath caught. A drop of water fell from her glass onto the paper, smearing the ink. She blinked once, twice, then locked every window, every latch, every bolt. When she finally crawled into bed, she took the note with her, read it again and again until dawn. Lauren waited until the building fell quiet. Nabersham, early afternoon. Most neighbors were at work or running errands. The perfect time to do something stupid. She had barely eaten. Her stomach twisted with nerves, but the note from last night still lay on her kitchen table. The ink now faded where the water smudged it. She folded it and put it in her pocket, not out of sentiment. Out of spite. She wasn't going to stop. The hallway stretched before her, long and dim, humming faintly with fluorescent flicker. Lauren approached the door to 3A like it might bite. The tape was still there, frayed now, one corner curled up like a dry leaf. She reached into her coat pocket and took out a pen. Carefully, she slid it under the edge of the tape, pressing gently, not breaking it, just enough to lift it slightly. The sound it made was soft but sharp, like skin peeling from a sunburn. She paused, listened. Nothing. Then, for the first time, she put her knuckles to the wood and knocked. Once, then again, then a third time. The sound echoed down the hallway like it didn't belong. Silence followed, long, heavy, drenched in something invisible. Lauren held her breath. Her hand still hovered near the door. Then she heard it. Not a voice, not movement. A sound. From inside. A soft, hollow click. Like a latch, a lock, or something being set. She stepped back, suddenly aware that her heart was in her throat. Then a second sound. Scratching. Faint, deliberate, right behind the door. Something dragged across wood. Lauren backed away. Fast. She didn't run, but she walked quickly back to her door, hand fumbling for her keys, breath short. Once inside, she locked the door. Twice. Then slid down the wall and sat on the floor, her knees shaking. Whatever was behind that door, it had heard her. And now she was sure it knew she wasn't going away. The next morning, Lauren didn't go to work. She told the library she felt sick, which wasn't exactly a lie. Her hands still trembled. Her sleep had been broken by strange dreams, and her nerves were too thin to pretend nothing was happening. Instead, she walked 3 blocks to the post office. Something about the sealed door, the scratching, the photo, it all pointed inward. Someone wanted to stay hidden or forgotten, but Lauren couldn't let it go. She stood in line behind a man mailing Christmas cards in September and a woman arguing over a shipping fee. When her turn came, she stepped up to the counter, heart thudding. "Hi, I live in Fairview Apartments, Unit 3B. I think there might be something wrong with my neighbor in 3A. Has she gotten any packages lately or not picked something up?" The clerk blinked. Young guy. Beard. Tired eyes. He scratched his head. 3A? What's the name? Lauren paused. She didn't know. But then she remembered the photo. She pulled it out of her coat pocket and flipped it over. In the corner, almost invisible, written in pencil, A. Delaney. She looked up. Delaney. First initial A. The clerk typed for a moment, then nodded. Actually? Yeah, there's something. Been sitting here for weeks. No pickup. He disappeared into the back. Lauren's heart pounded like a drum. He returned a moment later with a small box. Brown. No return address. Just a name. A. Delaney 3A. Written in that same shaky hand as the envelope. He slid it onto the counter. You're not her, right? Lauren shook her head. Can't give it to you then. Sorry. I can hold it a few more days. Lauren stared at the box. Her fingers itched. Okay, she said softly. Thank you. She turned to go. But as she reached the door, she heard the clerk mutter behind her. She's not the first one to disappear from that building, you know. Back at home, Lauren dropped her coat over a chair and sat at the kitchen table with her laptop. She didn't know what exactly she was looking for, and she just knew she couldn't stop. She opened a browser and typed, A. Delaney Fairview. Apartments, then Delaney. Missing Baltimore, then just A. Delane and E. Obituary. Nothing useful, nothing recent. She tried variations, added the street name, removed it, narrowed the dates. Still nothing. She leaned back frustrated. But then, instinctively, she checked something else, something she used every day. She logged into the city's public library database. Under cardholder lookup, she typed, Delaney. A list appeared, mostly teenagers, parents with kids. Then she saw it. Delaney, Abigail M. Card hash 044107, Unit 3. A Fairview Apartments. Lauren's breath caught. She clicked the entry. Last checkout, July 18th. Book title, Surviving Silence, Memoirs of Women Who Disappear. Lauren stared at the screen. The return date was blank. Not overdue. Not returned. Just left open. She checked the account activity. Nothing after July 18th. As if Abigail Delaney had turned the last page and vanished. Lauren rehearsed the call in her head 5 times before dialing. She even wrote down her points on a yellow sticky note. Abigail Delaney, 3A. Missing? Sealed door. Package unclaimed. Note, sound. No contact since July. She read it twice, took a breath, dialed. 911 redirected her to non-emergency. The woman on the other end sounded tired, polite but worn down. Lauren explained everything, carefully, calmly. The woman asked for the address, the details, repeated them back. Then came the pause. Has she been reported missing by family? No, I don't know her family. I'm her neighbor. So you haven't spoken to her personally? No, but I know something's wrong. Ma'am, unless there's evidence of a crime or a wellness request from next of kin, I can't escalate this to active status. You could file a concern report, but I'm telling you, she might be gone. Or hurt. Or, I understand, the woman cut in, her voice softer, but you'd be surprised how often people disappear. By choice. Lauren swallowed. Can I at least file the concern? Of course. I'll take down the details. She gave them, slowly, clearly. When the call ended, Lauren sat still. The sticky note was now damp from her hand. She stared at it and knew no one was coming. And the basement of the Fairview apartments had always unsettled her. The walls were uneven, sweating with moisture. Pipes overhead dripped occasionally with a slow, indifferent rhythm. The air smelled like dust, rust, and old water. Most tenants never came down here. Laundry machines had been broken for years. The light bulbs flickered in protest, but Lauren needed to see for herself. She held her phone flashlight in front of her like a weapon. Every step echoed. Old furniture leaned against the walls, broken chairs, a mattress rolled in plastic, an office desk with missing drawers. Then she saw it. A line of apartment mailboxes, old ones, rusted shut, probably from before the building was renovated. Most had been painted over or sealed with screws. Except one. Box 3A. It was slightly ajar. Lauren approached, fingers trembling. Inside was a stack of papers, damp around the edges. She pulled them out slowly. At first, they seemed like scraps. Grocery receipts, folded notes, torn book pages. But then she saw the handwriting. Familiar. Tight. Tilted forward. The same as on the envelope. One note read, "I am not invisible. But if I disappear, no one will ask why." Another. "Don't let them silence me again." Lauren clutched the pages. A noise echoed behind her. She spun, light shaking in her hand. Nothing, just the dripping pipe. But she didn't wait. She ran up the stairs, clutching the stack, heart pounding in her throat. And this time she didn't lock the door behind her. She bolted it. Lauren didn't want to be alone with the pages. They sat on her table, half dry, curling at the corners. The handwriting haunted her, the words too sharp to ignore. She needed someone else to see them, to say it out loud, that something was wrong. She knocked on 3C just after 6 p.m. Mrs. Green opened the door slowly, wearing a robe with tiny blue flowers and holding a spoon. "Soup night," she said. "Sorry to bother you," Lauren said. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" Mrs. Green raised an eyebrow. "Only if you promise not to bring ghosts with you." Lauren stepped inside. It smelled like thyme and boiled chicken. Familiar. Grounding. She laid the papers on the kitchen table. Mrs. Green read them in silence, line by line. When she finished, she didn't speak right away. Lauren waited. Finally, the old woman sighed. "Delaney." "Yes." "That name's not new." "You knew her?" "Not well. Quiet girl. Always looked over her shoulder, like someone might be following her. Never smiled with her teeth. That kind of thing sticks." "Did anything happen?" Mrs. Green tapped a finger on the paper. "Something always happens, especially to women like her. The kind no one believes until it's too late." She looked up. "You think she's gone?" Lauren hesitated. "I think she asked for help, and no one listened." Mrs. Green nodded slowly, then said something Lauren wasn't ready for. "You might be the first person who ever did." It was just after sunset. The hallway outside Lauren's door was quiet again, that eerie kind of quiet, where silence doesn't soothe. It listens. She had just finished washing dishes when she heard the softest sound. Scratch? Tap? She turned off the faucet. Waited. Nothing. She walked to the door and looked through the peephole. Nobody. But something was there. On the floor. She opened the door slowly. There, right in front of her welcome mat, sat a small green plastic dinosaur. Its tail was scuffed, one eye missing, teeth dulled from time and small hands. Lauren's breath caught. She'd seen this toy before, in the photograph. She picked it up with shaking fingers. It was warm, as if it had just been placed there seconds ago. She looked both directions down the hallway. Empty. She stepped back inside, locked the door, deadbolt, chain. All of it. Then she sat on the floor with the dinosaur in her lap, staring at it like it might whisper the truth. There was no doubt now. Someone was watching her. Someone who knew. And someone who didn't want her to stop. It started with a soft click. Lauren had just set the dinosaur on her bookshelf when she heard it. Faint. Precise. Metal against metal. She rushed to the door. The hallway was still empty. But across from her, the door to 3A, it was ajar. Just slightly. A crack wide enough to see the darkness inside. Her heart slammed in her chest. Every instinct screamed, "Don't." She stepped out anyway, crossed the narrow hallway. Her hand hovered near the frame. "Hello?" she said quietly. "Nothing." She pushed the door open. The smell hit her first. Dust, paper, dry air, and something faint underneath, metallic, like old keys or blood long since dried. Inside it was dim, curtains drawn, no lights. She stepped in slowly, careful not to touch anything. The air felt thick, like the apartment was holding its breath. Furniture sat in quiet poses. A couch with a blanket folded too perfectly. A bookshelf filled with books spine inward. A small table with a teacup half full. Lauren turned. The walls were covered in pages, handwritten, glued in lines, hundreds of them. She moved closer. The same handwriting, the same slant, and all the same message, rewritten over and over. No one will believe me. Lauren's knees buckled. She leaned on the wall, breath shaky. Then behind her, something moved. Not loudly, but enough. She turned slowly. In the shadow of the hallway stood a woman, pale, thin, hair matted. She blinked once, twice, then said, "You shouldn't be here." They stared at each other. The woman in the hallway didn't speak again at first. Her eyes were wide but not shocked, more like someone who hadn't looked directly at another person in a very long time. Lauren found her voice first. "Abigail?" The woman didn't nod, but she didn't deny it either. Lauren took a breath. "I've been looking for you. I didn't mean to break in." "But you didn't break in," Abigail said. Her voice was dry, unused. "I left the door open." "Why?" Abigail stepped closer, into the dim spill of light from the hallway. "Because I wanted to know if anyone would notice." Lauren swallowed. "I did." Abigail gave a dry, almost soundless laugh. Took long enough. There was no anger in her voice, just something deeper, something cracked. "You left the note, didn't you?" "The envelope." "Yes." "And the dinosaur?" "Yes." The words hung between them like fog. "You're alive," Lauren said, softer now. "You're really here?" Abigail nodded slowly. "But I'm not really living." Lauren didn't rush her. She waited. Abigail's voice, when it came again, was quieter, raw. He wasn't always violent. That's what makes it worse. He knew how to disappear into charm. Neighbors liked him. Landlords trusted him. When I said I was scared, people smiled like it was nerves. When I showed bruises, they said it was clumsiness. She shook her head. "I moved here to start over. New name, new number." But he found me anyway. Lauren's eyes widened. "He came here." Abigail nodded slowly. Not loud, not obvious. Just waiting, watching. He never broke in, just stood by the door some nights. Left notes I couldn't trace. Once, he slipped a photo under the door. Of me, sleeping. Her voice cracked. I told the manager. He said he couldn't do anything without proof. The police told me to keep a log. Then one day, I stopped calling. Because it was easier to disappear myself. Lauren sat down across from her. "But you're still here." Abigail looked up. "And you're the only one who knocked." Lauren stayed until the light began to shift through the curtains. They didn't talk much after the confession. There was nothing more to say. Because what Abigail had lived through wasn't a mystery, it was a silence everyone had agreed to. A silence made of convenience, fear, paperwork, and disbelief. A silence that wrapped itself around women like her and called it privacy. Lauren left the apartment just after dawn. She didn't go back to bed. She didn't go to work. She went home, opened her laptop, and wrote. At first, the words came slow, then faster, then like floodwater. She wrote about the hallway, the note, the dinosaur, the sealed door. But most of all, she wrote about everyone who saw and did nothing. She didn't name names, but the guilt was there between every line. That same day she published the story. By evening, it had spread across social media. Dozens of women replied. Some with sympathy, some with fury, but most with recognition. I lived this. I begged for help. No one came. Lauren wasn't surprised. But what did surprise her was the way the building reacted. Neighbors who hadn't made eye contact in months began to whisper. By the mailbox, I thought she just kept to herself. In the stairwell, my husband said not to get involved. And in the lobby, Dennis, property manager, gatekeeper of rules, pulled her aside. "Can we talk?" She stared at him, folded her arms. "Sure." He glanced around. "Look, we were told not to push. Someone from ownership said she had issues, that she'd sue if provoked." Lauren's stomach turned. "So, you let her rot behind that door?" He didn't answer, but his silence did. She stepped forward, past him, toward whatever was next. Because now she knew. Sometimes silence isn't just complicity. Sometimes it's cruelty with a key. The next day, Lauren quit her job. Not out of drama. Out of clarity. She printed the blog post. She made copies of Abigail's notes. She reached out to someone she hadn't spoken to in 10 years, a friend from college who now worked at a local news station. Within 48 hours, a small segment aired. No names, no addresses. Just the truth. A woman disappeared in plain sight, her cries ignored, her pain dismissed. The building had watched. So had the people. The segment went viral. In the following days, Lauren received emails from other women, other apartments, other neighborhoods. I know this story. I was her. I am her. Then came the lawyers. Then a quiet call from someone in city housing who said, "You stirred up something." But Lauren had stirred more than that. She'd stirred guilt. She'd stirred fear. And she'd stirred hope. When reporters finally came to Fairview Apartments, Abigail didn't hide. She stood beside Lauren, thinner than ever, eyes dark, tired, but standing. She said just one sentence into the microphone. "They almost erased me." Lauren didn't speak. She didn't need to. She had already given her voice to someone who had none. And now, that voice refused to disappear. The hallway was quiet again. But it was no longer that kind of quiet. The flickering light above 3A had finally been replaced. The walls had been repainted. Someone had left a pot of fake flowers near the elevator. Lauren stood outside her door, keys in hand. She didn't live here anymore, not full time. But she visited often. Abigail had moved out. A new tenant lived in 3A now. Young, loud music, bright laugh. Lauren hadn't met her yet. But that wasn't the point. The point was, someone had knocked. Someone had cared. And because of that, a story had been saved. A voice had been found. A silence had been broken. Lauren turned her key, opened the door. Inside, the bookshelf still held the dinosaur. She kept it there not to remember what happened, but to remember what almost did. She believed now that every hallway held someone waiting. And sometimes all it takes is one knock to change everything. And maybe you've walked past a door like that. Maybe you've heard something. Maybe you didn't know what to do. And tell us. Because someone else might be reading. And they might need to know. They're not alone anymore. Share your thoughts in the comments.